Hello and welcome to the show. I'm V. LaBianca and I need to talk. Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by today. We are a little bit under the weather still after last week, but we are back. You will notice that said last week's date. It is not in fact the 20th, it's the 27th, which means that we only have like 5 more episodes left for the year, which is cool. Not much going on besides recovery. Everything has been going good. I hope everybody had a wonderful St. Turkey Day if you partake. And if you had to deal with religious family or politically inflammatory family over the holiday, feel free to call in, let us know how that went, and if anything has been rattling around in your brain, an argument that could have gone better, a point that was made that you do not have a refutation for, give me a call. We can chat through all of that. We do have a caller on the line, but I would love to talk to more of you. We are going to keep going until we don't have callers anymore. So if you would like to see this show continue on for the full hour and a half, you can call us at, what is the number? We have a number. 585-526-8774. Thank you, live chat. Oh, it's been a minute. All right, I'm in my big Joel sweater, and we are good to go. Let's dive right in. Let us talk with Javier in South Carolina. Javier, welcome to the show. Can you hear me? Maybe it would help.
Hello?
It would help if I unmuted you, wouldn't it?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes. I was a little confused. I wasn't getting any audio of the show through the phone.
Oh, that was my fault. Thank you for holding. Javier, welcome back.
Good to be back. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm seeing that you want to talk about whether or not people can choose their beliefs, and I'm curious where we're going to fall on that. What are your thoughts?
So I've been thinking a lot about whether or not people can choose their beliefs as of late, because, at least in my opinion, it seems like the sort of thing where I can sort of see either position, why someone would think either position, on one hand, it's not like, an example that I've heard is like, choose to believe that the president of a country is someone other than who it is, or choose to believe that the capital of a country is something other than what it is. You can't do that, I've heard people say. But on the other hand, it seems to me like through self-reinforcement or the reinforcement of others around you, plus self-reinforcement, that you can put yourself in the mindset of a certain belief being true, and that sort of fake it till you make it can sort of succeed in this case, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you, actually. I think that it's not an either or, which is why I really, really dislike it when anybody takes either position, whether they're theist, atheist, if they are saying, well, you can't choose what you believe, or yes, you can. Both are wrong, in my opinion, or at least not the full picture. The way that the human brain works is that it adapts, and that is the best thing about the human brain, is it can adapt to anything. You give it an environment and it will survive in that environment most of the time. It's just the thing we do for survival. So that is an internal biological, neurological mechanism, right? That is not within our control. If we live in a capitalist society, we are going to think that capitalist society is the way that things should be, or at least, are tolerable, and vice versa. So for me, I think that if you willingly put yourself into an environment where a belief is required or supported or argued for, and you exclude arguments to the contrary, I think that, what you're going to end up with is a belief that, the moment that clicks and all of a sudden now that's part of your worldview, maybe that is not in your control, but you controlled your environment into that belief, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean, and that's sort of what, the side I was more or less leaning on. Although, like you said, I don't think it's necessarily a one size fits all. Like for every belief, it's either voluntary or involuntary. But I think the I guess the follow up to that idea is where the not accountability. Well, yeah, I guess accountability comes for people's beliefs in that aspect, because I, just laying out my cards on the table, I am first and foremost concerned with people's actions, not merely the beliefs that they hold. Although, of course, people's beliefs inform their actions.
Right.
But I also know, from the way I've lived my life, that one can hold beliefs and not act upon them. They can hold a belief, but then through some other sort of, I guess, path of thinking, understand, hey, I have this belief, but I gotta step back.
Yeah.
And not act on it.
Well, I would argue that is not the full picture either, because the reason that they weren't acting on that belief is because they had a stronger one elsewhere, right? So if you are a Christian, for example, I know that you are not, Javier, but if you were, and...
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Kind of question mark.
All right, good to know. I just want to let you know I'm not putting a religion on you. If you were a Christian and you believed that marriage was between one man and one woman, right? That is a belief that you hold. If you also have a stronger belief in valuing the autonomy of other people and that you do not get the right to dictate whether or not they do things, that is the stronger belief. That's the one that's going to stop you from, voting for somebody who's going to eventually try and make gay marriage illegal, right? So it's not that there are beliefs and then there's a lack of belief that you can choose. It's just that, hey, you've got a stronger belief somewhere than the one that you're thinking about right now that's going to influence whether or not you do that thing. And the second that other belief, the one you're in this scenario, the second that the belief that marriage is between one man and one woman becomes stronger than the belief that you don't have the right to other people's bedroom activities, then you all of a sudden become a bigot, right? Or at least one that is acting on that belief. So for me, I think that the danger, that accountability that we're talking about, is in that structure where every belief that you have is interwoven with every other belief that you have. Some of them don't fit well together, and that's where cognitive dissonance comes into play. But at any given point, especially if you're surrounding yourself with a certain type of person, or a certain kind of argument, or a certain worldview, some of those beliefs are going to get stronger or weaker. They're muscles that are being exercised or not. And so it is always possible to hold a dangerous belief and not act on it, but it is never benign to hold a dangerous belief and not act on it, because the second that dangerous belief becomes the stronger one in any given fight, that's the one you're going to go with. And that is not a voluntary thing anymore. That is just how you are responding to your own worldview. So I guess that's where I would kind of push back on that, or at least add a little bit of my own take or perspective.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And that example sort of hits kind of close to home for me, as I've mentioned before. Some of my immediate family members are, to put it lightly, very homophobic. Even back when I was more, I guess, firm in Christianity, I was never really into that sort of thing. I mean, I knew what the Bible said, but I always was and still am more of a live and let live kind of guy, I really, after being told in my life a lot, I know what's best for you, I really picked up a distaste for telling other people I know what's best for you in regard to anything really, including the gender of person they were attracted to. So I was really more live and let live on that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And in terms of the weaving of beliefs, I guess that's generally I can see that point, regardless of my position on how I think someone should live their life. I've always had the stronger belief based more so in personal freedom and individualism, where, hey, you want to do your thing, as long as you're not hurting other people, go ahead.
Yeah. And the danger there is that if you did hold a belief that was being held at bay by your belief in individualism and personal freedom, that if you chose to put yourself in situations where you exercised the dangerous belief and not the belief in personal freedom, that belief would eventually overtake it and become the dominant one. And then, you might still have cognitive dissonance while you're going to the voting booth or while you're protesting at a pride parade or whatever, but it wouldn't be the thing that was driving you anymore. So that, I think, is why I talk so much about skepticism and having beliefs that are not actively harmful, because I don't believe that there is any situation in which you can hold them and know that in the future you are not going to act on them. So as long as you might not be acting on them now, and I'm not going to judge you for having a belief if those beliefs are not being acted out on, but I am going to be a little wary around you because I know that that is a belief that's in that ecosystem that you're cultivating, and give you a couple of months in the right environment, boom, that's the one that's going to take precedence,
Yes, I see. I see what you mean. I also like to go by the, I guess, track record sort of thing.
Yeah.
I see how a person ran. To quote someone I probably should not be quoting, Dr. Phil. Even though I don't exactly agree with Dr. Phil on a whole lot of things, but I remember one time I was watching a show and he said the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So that's sort of seeing how a person, sort of goes along for a bit has been what I've been, is basically my favorite method of choice for that sort of thing.
Yeah, but again, like I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. I agree, for all intents and purposes on the day-to-day, but we have seen our parents, our grandparents, and the people who are close to us absolutely fall for the most ridiculous cultish ideas in the last 10 years that are not predicted by their past behavior. And the reason that it's not predicted by their past behavior is because they did not have those beliefs as strong as they do now. And what happened was they fell into or went searching for environments that fostered that belief that at the time wasn't influencing their behavior, but now has been presented as either the rational course of action or, the moral good, and has grown to the point where there are a lot of us who can't have conversations with our families anymore about certain things. So yes, I think that on the day-to-day, if somebody is a nice person, doing generally good shit, awesome, like continue to hang around that person. If they consistently do things that hurt you or are unthoughtful, maybe put a little bit of distance. But also hold that space for the idea that even the people who are nice on the regular, if they are telling you that they have a bad belief and you're not seeing it acted on, that still warrants that red flag, because all it takes is one other person to validate that bad belief, one other person to validate that, and all of a sudden they aren't acting in a nice way anymore,
Yes, I understand, and it's always been a little bit odd for me in terms of that sort of thing, probably due to my more live and let live sort of thing I've made. I'm not going to say that I regret it, but I have been friends in the past with a lot of people that, let's say, are more than a little bit objectionable in the belief department. It just so happened that we get along because it's real easy for me to get along with most people. And sure, they've held some beliefs that I found very objectionable, but I haven't really had a problem with it. But of course, I could not, how do I put it? I could not deny that I very much was at odds with those beliefs.
Yeah. And I definitely want to make this clear as well, which is I'm not advocating for culling your community to the point where only people who have only unharmful beliefs are left, because frankly, I don't think that's any of us. I think we all hold harmful beliefs at some capacity and on some level. I think that what I want to say is, when you're thinking about opening yourself up to other people or giving people roles in the community that would allow them to have power over others, or voting for people, all of these positions where you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position, that's when you want to start thinking about, okay, maybe this person has said all of the right things, but I know that this is a belief that they hold, and I know that they have been talking with other people who hold this belief. At what point is this going to then become a situation where that belief takes over the value for, bodily autonomy or personal freedom? So, yeah, definitely not at all for the purist, crap of only engage with people who are unproblematic, because all that does is leave all the problematic people in their own little bubble, and it also is not possible to do without completely isolating yourself. So, on the same page with you there.
Yeah, I completely agree, although I get the feeling you and I may disagree on everything we consider problematic. I have never been a fan of just shut them out. I think that is just one of the worst things you can do, and if your ideas are the best ones, then airing them out will inevitably, in my opinion, show which one is the best one. But in any case, I won't take up any more of your time. I know there are more callers, so it's been nice talking to you, and have a nice day.
Absolutely. Thanks, Javier.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Well, there aren't any more callers currently, which is understandable. We didn't have a show last week, and you're gone for 1 week on this platform, and you're kind of buried. So totally understood. If you do want to come chat with me, we are taking calls. You can reach us at 585-526-8774, or you can use the link tiny.cc/callSG in the description and call in from anywhere in the world. In the meantime, let's see if we can get some super chats going to spark some conversation. Something. Skynix sent $2 and says, great way to end my 30th birthday. Have a great show. Oh, happy 30th birthday, Sky. Thank you for watching. All right. So I did come prepared. So I was suspecting that because we had a little bit of a lag last week, it might be a little bit difficult to get callers. So what I did was I found in a box randomly a tiny little journal from, I want to say 2014, so almost 10 years ago. And it is entitled Quest for God. And this, my friends, is a documentary. It's not very long, of my own deconstruction as it was happening as a 20-year-old. And when I read this, my jaw was on the floor, and I was deeply amused and also deeply saddened. And I was thinking I'd read a little bit of this, just so you guys can tell, like this is, it starts out, I'm 20 years old, okay? I'm 29. This is 9 years ago, and I'm not kidding when I tell you that this was I was right there with you guys, right? Like, this was me. All right. God. I am 20 years old. I have examined myself and found my understanding of God to be wanting. I have become frightened and upset too easily. My thoughts plod from day to day with little thought of the eternal except to question its existence. I am not at peace. I can feel him, the I am around me, pushing against me just around the corner. It is beautiful, tantalizing, profound, promising utter peace and courage if I can just understand it. I want to so badly. I am no longer sure of my faith. like a child who is convinced her real father is someone she has never met, someone who will explain her life to her, I go searching for a new God. This was before I came out. Even to myself. Part of that tantalizing around the corner, pretty sure was that I wasn't a she. Not really new, different. There is only one God, and he is everywhere. There for the taking if we can but find him. Not that I expect to understand God. I would never be so presumptuous. I cannot understand algebra, much less the Creator. The Creator, I like that name. If I could just find a facet of him to look at and understand, to cherish as my own, I would be content. And then I have a little bullet list. Issues with Christianity. It is not spiritual enough. Its tendency to be close-minded and judgmental. Saying no one else is going to be accepted. The lingo is one I had an issue with, apparently. Its lack of action in everyday life. Its synonymousness with conservatives or America in general. Putting God in a box. So those were the things I was thinking were wrong with Christianity as a Christian 9 years ago. Questions. Who is God? Is it blasphemous to call God something other than he? Is it possible for other faiths to access or commune with God? How much of the Bible is influenced by historical cultural norms? How much is still relevant? How important is the role of Jesus? How much of the Christian religion can you reject and still be a Christian? That's a telling one, you guys, just in case you are wondering. If you have to ask yourself, how much of this can I reject and still be a Christian? You probably don't want to be one anymore. Is it possible to commune with God through other non-traditional means? Can, for instance, picking a flower count as prayer? Is it possible that a spiritual high is able to last? Is it more holy to stay with strict, safe guidelines and be thirsty, or to venture into quote-unquote forbidden territory in a search for your Creator? How subjective is sin? Are there objective rights and wrongs besides things like murder? And how does one differentiate between opinion and truth? These are just some of the questions that have driven me to look farther into myself. I am not without faith or conviction, however. Things I believe now. Everyone has and continues to believe in, and that got crossed out, experience God. God is bigger than Christianity. People need more spirituality, especially Christians. Jesus was the Son of God and the gospel is true. God, on some level, wants me to find him. Being a nerd and a writer, my version of the quest for God incorporates a good deal of writing and reading. Here is where I will be recording my pilgrimage, my goals, to grasp and inhabit a facet of God, to be able to understand or at least guess the role of Christianity in the realm of the divine, to cultivate a relationship with God through personal intercession and communication, to be able to clearly and succinctly state my beliefs to someone else, that's important, and to eradicate Christian lingo and stereotypes from my faith unless I purposefully adopt them as true. And then I've got Matthew 7 and 8 in there. But yeah, that's the introduction to my little Quest for God booklet that I wrote 9 years ago, detailing exactly where I was at the time and exactly how far I've come since. So hopefully that tickled you. I know it did me. And if you have the same kinds of thoughts in your own brain right now, if any of this sounded like, oh, that's how I feel, or that's what I was thinking, call in, we can talk about it. I remember being here. And I can talk about how I got from this to being an atheist on the internet. But more importantly, even if you don't want to call in or engage with me at all, know that that is the direction you're headed. So tread lightly, I guess. All right. So that successfully bought us some time. It looks like we've got some more callers, which is great. Let me just pop these guys in here. Gorgeous. All right. Let's talk to Cameron in Minnesota. Cameron, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. You were calling about family members who aren't accepting of the fact that you are an atheist, which sounds familiar. I can relate. How are you? How are you doing? How are you holding up with all this?
I'm holding up just fine. The thing is like they are doing the whole standard. Oh, you really do believe you just you are just trying to run away from him. You just want to sin, yada yada yada, the standard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The whole extra thing about it is they're like really 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 involved with the MLM type of like group or situation, and like they have been for years and years, and it's like they're almost being forced into this whole Christianity thing. And then like my uncle, he like never used to really be into it or anything like that, and then he married my aunt, and then they got into all this. It was just one spot. Like they used to take me around on like drive things where they would go to random businesses at like 3 a.m.
Oh
and
my
they
gosh.
would take me with them and like have them witness about Jesus and their MLM company at the same time at people at 3 a.m. at random businesses in the cities. And like it's like now that I've reached this point where I've tried to tell them that I don't believe anymore. I'm not I'm not a Christian. They just constantly try to push everything on me, and it's like,
yeah, I can tell that it's very possible that boundaries are not their strong suit.
no.
Yeah. Okay. How long have you been out as an atheist with them?
With them, probably about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. And how long have you been an atheist? Period.
Well, let's see, I'm 31 now, so probably about like 8-ish years, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, we are honestly pretty similar in the timeline. And I can totally the 2 to 3 year mark. I know that this is frustrating as fuck to have to deal with.
Yeah.
If your experience is anything like mine, my family actually stopped with that after like 4 years. So you're almost there. There's a certain amount of time where they're like, oh, well, maybe it's a phase, or maybe it's something that is not, maybe it's not serious about it, whatever. That element will start to decrease. I'm pretty positive, because like after a while you can't tell somebody who's been doing a thing 10 years that like, oh well, actually
there's one thing that they started doing the whole like every time they're over, it's just, my aunt's like, oh well, Jesus said this and Jesus said this and you got to be like Jesus and
Yeah.
this, and like I'm like, it's kind of frustrating. But the thing is like my uncle started to distance himself from me quite a lot because of it, and like him and I used to be really close, and like now they're like, oh yeah, and he unadded me on social media, and he like everything, because he's like, oh yeah, stuff that you're posting, I can't have my friends and my people see and everything. And it's like, well,
Right.
that's kind of rough, like
that
like
is.
we used to be he taught me how to build a computer, dang it, and now he's an Apple guy. Like, what the hell?
Can't trust people these days. No, for real though, I think that's the trade-off, right? And it's an unfortunate reality, and you're certainly not alone in it. But the way that you can tell that your atheism has been sufficiently ingrained that they are not going to try to witness to you every time they see you is when they stop fucking talking to you. And that is heartbreaking. And I've had the same experience. I haven't talked to one of my aunts for almost 10 years now. And I have not, I had very strong relationships with my maternal grandmother, with a lot of my cousins, and I just kind of got shoved into the corner. A lot of that had to do with distance. Physically, I moved across the country, but there wasn't the effort to keep in touch in the same way that there was with other siblings. And it's because we make them uncomfortable, Cameron. Like, we are out here being good people, being just like we used to be, and having fruitful lives and relationships, but without a key component that they think is necessary. And that's...
Oh, see, that's part of what, like, the whole problem is like the whole argument this Thanksgiving here the other day was, like, basically they tell me that I'm rejecting God because, like, my brother committed suicide a couple years ago, and then a few years before that, my mother died. Oof. And, like, they're telling me that that's why I'm rejecting God because of those things, because, oh, God did that to you, so that's why you're rejecting him, and you're saying that he's not real, or, you know, whatever. I'm like, no, that's not the point. Like,
yeah. Honestly, I again empathize deeply with you, and I'm sorry about that, because that is, again, very close to my situation. My dad committed suicide in 2020 or 2019. And before that, he was massively abusive to the point where we had to run away from him and cut off all of communication. And for my family, my atheism kind of corresponded with that whole situation. And so they think that the reason I'm an atheist is because I'm rebelling against an abusive father who used Christianity as a cudgel, essentially, which is true, he did, but that is the argument that they have in their head to explain a behavior in me that they don't understand.
Yeah, it's just really frustrating, you know, it's like...
Yeah. It really is. It really is, because we're sitting here on the other side going, I can see how this is hurting you, and I have a way out, but you are telling me that I'm the broken one, and you're over here praying for me. Meanwhile, I'm out here, like, actually free of a lot of the shit that you are still scared of. So
you're praying for me and I'm thinking for you, you know?
Yeah, it's rough. It really is. I'm sorry that you're having to deal with that. Is there anything specific that you'd like some feedback on or help with?
It's just them combining that MLM stuff with it. Like, they literally throw that in with everything.
Yeah, it's...
Like everything. Like, they bring their products by and they're like, oh, you know... I don't want to say, like, they say Jesus says you should buy this, but basically they're like, Jesus says you should buy this.
Yeah, I have friends who are also out of that particular kind of MLM that uses Christianity to kind of, like, get in under the door. And it is...
Yeah, they got their super churches and they're, like...
It's weird as fuck. It is really odd. And honestly, as somebody who used to be a Christian, I don't understand how you can do that without thinking about Jesus and the money changers in the temple, right? Like, how on earth...
I even tried bringing that up. That up, and they're like, oh, well, that's blasphemous. That we are reshaping the temple. This is the temple, you know, like...
Oh, goodness. Yeah, honestly, Cameron, at this point, like, there is going to be a point in time where somebody in your family is going to be available for you. It might not be a member of, you know, whoever is in charge, your uncles, your aunts, your parents, grandparents, whomever. be available.
I do have one. He's my cousin.
Yeah.
He's actually the one that, like, I was always, like, brought up to hate. But, like, now that I see from his point of view, like, I'm like, dude.
Yep.
Now I get it.
I think that maybe making sure that you're available to that cousin, if that cousin is willing to talk, is a good first step to finding some community in your family. I have one sibling who really sees me and who I can really talk to, and that helps a lot. But also, like, you can step back from this. Like, if you are going to be proselytized at and told that you are broken and that's the cause of your atheism and have MLM wares hawked at your door by your family, you don't have to have them over for Thanksgiving. Like, that is a door you can close.
It was the other way around. We went there for Thanksgiving, but, like...
Oh, even easier. Just, sorry, can't make it this year. Jesus said to avoid you. Sorry. I don't know.
Jesus said, yeah. I love it. You should put that. You should put that on like a T-shirt or a cup holder that Jesus said to avoid you.
I like that. It's very possible we may do that. In the meantime, feel free to use it. Yeah, I empathize with you. I think that you seem like you are finding yourself and finding a way to be yourself around people who are fairly hostile to it, which is a bummer we have to deal with. But you're certainly not alone. And thank you for calling in.
Thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely.
Just one last thing. I'm gonna email you guys about it, but you guys still need mods for chat?
Always, yeah. Feel free to give us an email at Contact Skeptic Generation.
I'll email you.
Yeah, sounds perfect. All right, thanks, Cameron.
All right, cool. All right, thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, bye.
Yep, bye.
Oh my goodness. Jesus said to avoid you. Yeah, I don't know. Cameron, that is so many people's stories after this holiday. And it's rough. It's really rough. So thank you, everybody who's watching this, who's commenting in the live chat, who hangs out on our Discord. You guys are a community that a lot of people find a lot of value in and can find the community that they're not getting from their MLM Christianese family members. All right. We are talking to Mark in California.
Hey, V.
Mark, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thanks. I'm well. I'm glad you're feeling better. I was calling on an entirely different track than the previous call.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Okay. I come from a different sort of a background than many of the people that end up calling into the show because I was never religious. I was never a Christian. Mm-hmm. I was raised in a scientific household where we just didn't talk about religion. It didn't even occur to me that people were religious until middle school when I noticed that there were all these churches around. Mm-hmm. So my focus as an atheist has always been, okay, I'm an atheist, I'm a skeptic. Now what?
Right.
Now, what kind of world are we trying to build? And I see a lot of people in the atheist sphere kind of, because they've been wounded by their religious experience, kind of falling into the anti-theist hole and just staying there and beating against Christianity.
Yeah.
Or religion generally. And I just think that there's a bigger question to be asked about, what kind of a world would we build as skeptics and atheists if we were given the opportunity? What kind of values would we advance?
I think that's a good conversation, and it's multi-parted. There are many pieces to this.
Yeah.
First, I think that there is. I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying this. There is an impetus to remaining in the angry atheist phase longer than you actually are in it. It's one of the reasons why we took this show in a different direction from the one we were on previously. It's one of the reasons why I have stopped kind of engaging with a lot of the personalities and shows that I have that brought me into the atheist movement, because it is lucrative socially and sometimes financially to stoke the angry atheist phase, and the people who are just coming out of that religious environment. They are wounded, they are angry, they are looking for something to validate their experience, and validating their experience and hearing that anger is a valuable component of getting them out. So I don't want to belittle that or say that that's not something that should happen. But when that's all that you do, when you don't move beyond that and start asking questions, Mark, like what you are asking, what next? Okay, how do we build a moral system outside of that? All of that is so important to bring the conversation forward in any meaningful way, because otherwise what we end up with is a increasing majority, because atheists are increasing in the US, that are just now angry ex-Christians who are anti-theist and mad at everybody else. And that sets us up for a whole other kind of problem that's going to happen in 25, 50 years unless we start having these conversations right now.
Absolutely.
So that was my little caveat right there. But what I think that we need to be doing is stopping the focus on religion entirely. And that could get, again, maybe we lose some followers over this, I don't know, but there is something that is so... It feels to me, the more that I look at what's actually wrong with the world and what actually helps and hurts, religion has become a scapegoat and a tool that is used by people who value the division that religion causes. They value the fact that religion makes you docile. Religion can make you a follower, a sheep, and be proud of it. Call yourself a sheep proudly and follow what your pastor tells you. So all of a sudden, you don't need to worry about convincing 200 people. You just need to convince one person. And then 199 people who listen to that person is going to follow. So I think that focusing on religion and talking about it in terms of atheist and theist, and that by itself needs to go. We can have those conversations, but when we're talking about building a new society or creating a culture that includes everybody, religion has to be just as incidental as like what job you have, right? Or what kind of car you drive. The second that we can deplatform it to the point where it can be just another character trait about a person is when we can actually make progress.
I really agree with that. In the communities that I'm building with around atheopaganism, we spend very little time talking about religion. We do have an affinity group for people who are recovering from religion, where they can talk about the hurt and the betrayal and we understand that to be a separate conversation from the conversation about, how do we build observances into our lives? What sorts of values do we, consider appropriate? Those sorts of things. And I hadn't actually really put together what you just said, the idea of dropping the conversation about religion entirely. But I think it's a good point, because as long as our fight is against something that is so intrinsic to people's identity, it's just going to be a really uphill slog. I think we need to wait for demographics to do this for us.
Yeah,
and
it's certainly not something...
I'm concerned...
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm concerned, too, about, what you talk about with a population of people who are really angry. We've seen in the last 6 years what happens when you have a population of people who are really angry. They can be awful. They can be really destructive, and we don't want to be those.
Exactly.
So we need to start having the conversation about who we do want to be.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And another big component of that is going to be, like you said, demographics. It's going to be getting out of bubbles of the type of person that, because what happens is people leave a church because they stop believing. And then they go and find other people who have left similar churches who have also stopped believing. And what that does is that creates another echo chamber of people who have left churches because they stopped believing, but in all other respects are still living out lives that are parallel to that church with, one big difference. They don't believe in God anymore. And what really stopped my path in that direction, thankfully, and opened up new doors for me was listening to people who, like you, had never been religious, or people who were still Christian but were looking at things from a much more progressive and leftist standpoint than I was as an atheist at the time. Or, people who had completely different religions or experiences with Christianity. A lot of people in the Black and BIPOC communities. And listening to indigenous religious spokespeople and like people who talk about indigenous religion and how that intersects with the things that I value as a secular humanist. All of those other perspectives, those other demographics that I was kind of opening myself up to, was the thing that stopped me from just being another angry atheist on the internet. And I think that moving forward, we are going to perpetuate the same exact abuses, the same exact problems as our Christian, past would have. If all we are doing is saying, well, now I don't believe in God anymore, so that makes me a better person, so now I get to decide what you do. That's never, ever going to be the answer.
Yeah. Well, I see that we, once again have a really shared perspective on this. I just think it's a really important conversation to continue to have because there is so much work, and it's sort of interesting because when I think about the work of working with people that are deconstructing, that are coming out of Christianity or other authoritarian religions, the word that I think of in relation to that is either pastoral or ministry, because it's this sort of healing, counseling kind of deal.
Yeah.
But that's only really, one sort of step on the way towards, well, how are you going to be a full person now, right? You were in a discipline that told you not to be a full person, that told you to be obedient to an authority and take your instruction from someone else. Now, how are you going to step into the fullness of yourself? Because, in my opinion, people are amazing. I think people have extraordinary beauty inside them, except for the most damaged of us. Some of whom are dangerous, and it's a shame, but some people get broken. But most people, given an opportunity to be loved and to see themselves clearly, will blossom. And I want to live in a society where that is an explicit goal, where the actual structure of the society is trying to foster that in people.
Yeah. Honestly, again, we need to move outside of the realm of religion, though, because religion, in the context of what you're saying, is a tool to keep people from expressing themselves fully and being themselves fully. But the goal is not ultimately just to make people religious, right? That might be individuals' goals, right? Like your street preacher isn't thinking about the broader implications of a community that all adheres to the same moral fabric, but that is ultimately what we're talking about. A culture, a society that fully embraces all types of people is one that makes that removes the requirement to work certain types of jobs in order to make a living wage, right? It pretty much eradicates the concept of wages altogether in its current context. It is a socialist welfare state at its minimum. And that is where the conversation always turns. If we talk to Christians who we see as being oppressive in these areas, and we start saying, okay, well, what if you could keep your faith? What if we could say that, like, you were right, but let's talk about, you know, a more progressive form of that doesn't infringe on your beliefs in God, but maybe helps out your neighbor a little bit more. A lot of them are going to say no, because it's not about the faith. It has been so deeply tied into politics that at this point, opposing somebody's political stance is opposing their religion and vice versa. So what we need to do, like I said, is completely, like, I think we need to stop talking about the religious component and start talking about it from the political standpoint, because without that, we're never going to get to that utopia, Mark, that you described, which I agree with. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I guess my feeling is that one of the things that I'm frustrated about is that because there are so many atheists now, and so many of the so-called nones, people that are identify as with no religion, we should be a much more potent political force now than we are.
Right. We should.
And we aren't. I mean, I'm fortunate that my congressman is Jared Huffman, who founded the Secular Caucus in the House of Representatives. But he was the first member of the House of Representatives ever to describe himself as a non-believer.
Yeah.
And we're a long way behind. You know, the Christian right, in terms of the active members of the Christian right, it's only about 20% of the country, but they swing so much weight.
Well,
and
they
I just
also
feel
have.
Like we ought to be able to do that too.
Yeah, I think that honestly, I agree that the sheer demographic size of people who are not Christian in the United States should be a much bigger political force, whether or not we're talking, you know, Democrat, Republican, you know, third party, whatever. That should be a demographic that is actually talked to directly. This is why, you know, voting for me would benefit this group specifically. And it's not. And we know the reasons for that. The other thing I do want to just say beforehand, though, is that, like, the reason that there is so much weight behind a very small group of people right now is because they have money. So, like, they've got a lot of monetary and social liquidity that the atheists in this country simply do not. And so there's definitely that element as well. So it's not necessarily a moral failing on the part of that specific demographic so much as it is the deck has been stacked against us and continues to be. And it's just by sheer numbers at this point that we are starting to see change. And that is what is freaking out the people who are on the other side of this, and causing them to bear down as hard as they are. Because even with the money, even with the establishment of entire foundations and research centers and think tanks and colleges dedicated specifically to getting them into power, they are still losing their grip on that monopoly, and that is freaking them out. So the more we have these conversations, Mark, the faster we're going to get to some semblance of a world that actually treats us all like equals.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly when you have the Koch brothers and the Waltons and all the, it makes things a lot easier when you have billions of dollars pouring into your coffers. And I think there's a cultural thing too. I mean, one of the things about skepticism is that people tend to think for themselves, right? Whereas capitalism doesn't want you to think for yourself. It wants you to be a good little cog in the wheel and make money and then donate it to conservative causes. So there's that factor too.
Yeah, it's a movement centered around "don't tell me what to do," which makes it very difficult to organize, makes it very difficult to come together on anything. So there is certainly that element as well. But we at least need to keep talking about it and shedding light on it. So thank you for calling in, Mark. I appreciate you.
Oh, sure. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, V. Thanks. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh my goodness. Now y'all come in. This is amazing. So many people. All right. I am curious to hear what Stephen in Arizona has to say. So let's talk to Stephen about how we're socialized to think about God and why that makes it difficult to break away. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, V. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I was thinking about, as I was listening to what you had written in your journal and where you were in your journey, and what I was struck by was what I'm having in conversations with people about, when I say people, I mean theists, because I'm an atheist. When we have discussions about belief systems and so forth, I come back to, what would you think God or a supreme deity was if you didn't have a Bible or a religion that is constantly around you telling you what that is? So you're not left to your imagination about what a supreme deity might be able to do or not be able to do or did, because you were so ingrained with the Bible as this foundational historical document that isn't even historical. Because I remember, and I've been an atheist longer than you've been alive, apparently, so there's that. But I remember when I was younger, my mind being blown at the idea of Jesus not being a real thing. Like that was like one of the last things that I could let go of. It was like I didn't believe in the Bible. I believed the Bible as an historical document, but I didn't believe in the Bible. And that was sort of how I deconstructed it first. And then I remember being maybe 25 or 30 thinking, holy crap, no pun intended, Jesus might have been a made-up figure to just support the story, just like anybody else could have been, because we don't, I mean, to me, I look at the Bible as historical literature, that there are kernels of truth throughout, but I don't believe that, Moses wrote it, or, certain things just don't add up when you break it down and you deconstruct the Bible. But we as a society, I grew up as an American, we as a society are so ingrained to think about the Bible as an historical document, and these preconceived ideas are forced on us as to what a God should be or could be, whether it's the Jewish God, the Catholic God, the Islamic God, or, you want to go Hindu and go to all those gods. It's always somebody else's idea because we're so socialized that way. And I basically just wondered what your thoughts were on this, because you're at a different point in your journey. As you think about these things, I wondered if you struggled with the same thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The holy shit, this could all be made up moment is a big one, and is very helpful to break down some of those assumptions that you make without knowing it. I think this is one of the reasons why I don't buy that apologetics is for non-believers. I don't believe that when somebody gives you the Kalam cosmological argument or the transcendental argument for God or the teleological, like any of these arguments that start with something must exist, therefore God, none of it is actually for people who don't already believe in God, because the second you go, okay, how do you get from the source of all knowledge to Jesus Christ, that's a hurdle they don't ever jump over, and they can't, because there is no way to get there. And it relies on what you said, that cultural understanding of God that just permeates living in the United States because of Christianity. So you have to presume, right, that Christian God before you even hear an argument for God for that argument to work. So yeah, it's absolutely inescapable And what you'll see a lot of the time as well is in in pagan situations where pagans come into, they might leave Christianity or they might never have been religious, but if they become pagan, Norse pagan, Greek pagan, Celtic pagan, whatever, and they start adhering to other belief systems, other gods, what a lot of them do, not all of them, but a lot of them bring that Christianity into that new religion and start making it so that those gods now are, have attributes of the God that they grew up with because it is so deeply ingrained. And it's really uncomfortable to start unpacking that. So yeah, I think that even people who say, the universe works in mysterious ways, or the universe wants X, Y, and Z for me, the law of attraction, all of these things are based on a very specific type of supreme entity that knows everything and wants the best for you and has the power to influence the world around it, right? That is just assumed across the board. So yeah, it's actually deeply, deeply difficult to come out of that concept, even if you have left Christianity, because it is just so overwhelming. So yeah, I think you're spot on with that analysis.
Because in the beginning, because I've always questioned my whole life. I mean, I went through a Protestant and then Catholic upbringing, but I remember thinking about how religions progressed or evolved from multi-theistic or polytheistic to monotheistic, and how I could see where that was happening, and things. There just seemed to be real human psychology patterns at work, not so much something supernatural.
Yeah, learning.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, learning where religion came from and how it evolved, not just religion as a concept, which is absolutely fascinating, but also how Christianity evolved and what the church fathers wrote and when they wrote it and what pieces of information we then took as gospel from randos whose names we didn't even know. That to me was the nail in the coffin, right? When I looked at my spiritual mentor and asked her what she thought of St. Augustine, and whether or not she thought that, X, Y, Z, that the idea of the fall or whatever was influenced by his writings, and she goes, "Who is St. Augustine?" I was just like, I've been listening to people who know fuck all about what they're saying, and they are going to judge me for being doubtful when I'm the one bringing the information to them. So that was really a big nail in the coffin for me as well.
And I thought Mark mentioned something important about people coming out of religion and deconstructing it, that it's them realizing themselves as a full person rather than being told what to do. Mm-hmm. And that kind of spoke to me in another way, that I feel like the religions or the belief systems that I tend to lean toward, because I still have a belief system as an atheist. It may not be a religious one, but it's a belief system. And it's about empathy. It's about understanding other people and what their motivations are, whether it's fear, whether it is religion, whether it's what just makes them comfortable, versus being told what to think and told what to do. And it's that lack of empathy that I feel is more endangering to the world across the board, because of the way the religions behave, but how we behave about our environment, and just how we relate to each other. Just recent events, whether it be, Colorado or elsewhere, that people aren't putting themselves in the shoes of other people so quick as saying, no, you can't do that, or you can't live that way. And I was also the one that brought up, we won't have to talk about it now, but about legislating, because I want to know how you're going to behave in a situation. So I'm going to put rules on you so that I know what you're going to do, because I don't want to think about what you might feel, whether it's the pronoun thing or any of the things where it's like, one of you, I don't know if it was you or one of the callers, brought up about people wanting to be heard and wanting to be seen and wanting to be valued. And as soon as we do that, I feel like organized religions immediately break down because it flies in the face of, to your point about, I'm paraphrasing with other phrases, like love the sinner, but not the sin, or yes, you can feel that way, just don't act on it. And those sorts of nonsensical things that they tell us to do. So, it just, as I said, as you were reading your journal and I thought about where I was at a similar age before you were born, that I was, coping with a lot of the same things and how I've deconstructed. And the socialization piece just is so hard. We live in a quote-unquote Judeo-Christian society. I celebrate Christmas. I don't celebrate it for religious reasons, but there are things about it I like, and I feel like that's okay, and it makes my family still happy. And to your point about family accepting and things getting better, it does. I have a large family that's very religious, and I have, I was telling the screener about an evangelical aunt who posts an article about every 3 months about discovering Noah's Ark again. Yeah. And I always debunk it, and then it comes back 3 months later. But they are still respectful of me. So, we have to take our wins where we can. But lovely to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephen. As always, you've wrapped that up really nicely, and I'm happy to hear your perspective.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a great week.
You too. Bye. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. You can only find Noah's Ark so many times, you guys. Like, there weren't multiple of them. Although that would be interesting if there were. It's just Jesus testing you like the dinosaur bones in the ground. All right, we've got a couple more callers, and then we can wrap up. Let's talk to Caleb in Maryland. Caleb, welcome to the show. You've got a little bit of a problem with a friend who's religious?
Yeah, kind of, navigating a conversation.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, so just for background, her religious belief is more deistic. Like, she believes that, like, an undiscovered scientific force is God, just as kind of like context. But
okay.
We were having a conversation one day, like we usually do at work, and she's been going through a lot recently, and she made the comment that the hardest thing about being religious is that you can't help but feel during those moments that maybe is God, like, punishing you. And I didn't know, like, how to navigate that with the idea of, like, avoiding, like, derailing into a, well, does God actually exist conversation?
Yeah. Interesting. So your friend is a deist who has a concept of a God who is still active in the way the world works? That's interesting.
Yeah, I asked her point blank once if she considered herself more theistic or deistic, because she's Jewish but not Orthodox, and she said she felt she was more deistic. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, here's my thing with that. I take this particular track with my family sometimes as well, which is my little brother was expressing to me how he did not need to worry about where he was going to be going to college because it didn't matter because God would put him where he needed to be. And I said, wow, that sounds like a really useful way to think about it. Right? It sounds like a way, like it sounds like thinking about it in that way is alleviating a lot of stress. That sounds like a cool coping mechanism. And of course, he was like, well, it's not a coping mechanism. It's real. Like, this is just how things are. Yeah. I was like, okay. But that to me is the best way forward when somebody is being vulnerable with you. And you don't want to derail the conversation into, God doesn't exist. Then what I would do is say to your friend, that sounds like a lot of pressure that you're putting on yourself right now. Like, it feels like you are choosing to, or maybe not even choosing, but it sounds like you're making this your fault somehow. Why do you think that it's your fault? And maybe that can help bring the conversation somewhere that's still helpful and hears her, makes her feel seen, but doesn't play into the why do you think God is punishing you angle so much as why do you think that this might be your fault in some way? Because honestly, it is easier to think that you are in control, you fucked up, and now God is punishing you, than dealing with some horrible, horrible shit for no fucking reason, right? That is the scary thing. It is 10 times scarier to think that things just fucking happen to you and happen to the people that you love, and there's nothing you can do to prevent it. There's no way you can be better next time. There's no way to mitigate the punishment by doing or saying the correct thing. It's just gonna happen. And I think that for a lot of people, there's this instinctual need to take ownership and to center themselves in whatever is happening. I'm the main character of my story, therefore I must have done something to warrant this. Or maybe this is preparing me for something else. Or maybe I'm supposed to use this for another reason. Like, all of it is about how it's affecting me. And that's understandable. That's human brains. That's how we work. But I think that focusing on that part and being very empathetic and very understanding and saying, hey, I get it. We need to center ourselves in these moments. That's just how we're wired. Why do you think this could be your fault? Or why do you think you might be receiving this punishment? And really maybe try and get in through that door.
Yeah, I think some of that you hit on is probably what she was also struggling with as well. Like, they dealt with the health issue at their apartment, her and her partner, that was basically due to neglect from the landlord. And I think, like, it's harder to just accept the fact that there's crappy people in the world that do things like that than to think, well, I must have done something to warrant being in this situation.
Yep. Oh man. See, this is where my anti-capitalist side kicks into high gear, and I'm like, ooh, instead of even thinking about talking about, like, well, why do you feel like God is punishing you? Be like, aren't landlords awful? Don't they fucking suck? What can we do to make that better? Is there a local law we can pass about health standards? Something like, if what she wants is to feel like this is preparing her for something, or if she wants to do something with this upset, this anger, this hurt, whatever, there are avenues that are actually really helpful. But as long as you're thinking, this is God doing something to me, that avenue of actually being helpful and effective in the real world is kind of closed off, right? It now becomes a conversation between you and this imaginary deity, as opposed to, as it should be, a conversation with that fucking landlord who is causing the issue. So, yeah, oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's interesting though. That's a really great perspective, because I didn't think about, like, kind of like taking the conversation in a different direction, because I have my own issues with capitalism that have become more developed over the last year or so. But I didn't think about, like, taking it more of a political, I guess, direction, instead of, like, trying to find a way to make it work with the religious direction it was currently going.
Yeah, and either can work, and you don't need to do either of them. But I think that for somebody who is not tied so closely to that idea of maybe like a God in the same way that an evangelical or a fundamentalist would be, if what she's dealing with is this sense of injustice, it could be really helpful for her and very cathartic to say, okay, you are feeling this thing, this is real. Instead of focusing on a God who you think may or may not be a cause of this, what can we do with this that is going to help you in the future and help other people, and, you know, put the responsibility where it belongs, which is on the people who are causing this problem. So it might be helpful in that way as well.
Okay. All right, excellent. Yeah, I think those are all great points, and I'll definitely mull over those, and if this conversation comes up again, I'll probably use one of them and see how it goes.
Cool. If it does happen again and you do use them, call back. I'd love to hear how things went.
Excellent. Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks, Caleb.
You're welcome.
Bye. Oh, man, we're getting political up in this right now. Oh, okay. We have about 10 minutes left. I want to talk to Jim in Ohio first, and then I'm seeing someone in the call-in queue that seems like they might be interesting to talk to as well. Let's dive in to Jim in Ohio.
Hi. I heard that you have another caller waiting, so I'll try to make this quick. First of all, just want to say I'm glad you're feeling better, and I hope Eric's feeling better.
Thank you. Yeah, we're both on the upswing.
There was a little pause, so I wasn't sure if we were cut off or something. Before I get into my topic, I just have kind of a quick definition question.
Sure.
One of your callers, I think it was Cameron, was talking about his family who's into a car or something. Anyway, they sell a lot of items or something, and I think he called it LMD. I'm just curious, what does that stand for?
Yeah, it's an MLM, so multi-level marketing. So it's a very specific form of kind of parasitic business running where essentially you just make money off of other people joining. You don't actually sell anything useful. You just make money off of recruiting other people. So it's kind of culty.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
A couple of callers, I think one of them was Cameron, the one who ended that, I guess his aunt or somebody wore a shirt, Jesus told me not to have anything to do with you or something like that.
Yeah.
And your own story about how you and your family are separate, and all the other people call with similar problems, how they've been kind of cut away from the family. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me, I'm not a biblical scholar or expert, so I can't tell you what chapter, verse, or what book it is. I assume it's in New Testament, because I think the Old Testament is about God and New Testament is about Jesus. Mm-hmm. But it always reminds me that there's a quote about Jesus. Excuse me, I have a little asthma. A quote from Jesus, "Think not I have come to bring peace. Rather, I have come to bring a sword. I have come to separate families, turn fathers against sons, mothers against daughters. Anyone who," and I'm paraphrasing this because I don't remember the exact quote, "anyone who loves her family more than me cannot be my disciple."
Yeah.
So much for his being humble.
Yeah.
Love me.
Yeah, Jim, that's a really good point. And I think that it's worth bringing up. So thank you for calling in with that. I think that there are a couple different directions to go here. As usual with me, I can't see a straight line for the life of me. But I think that what I want to focus on there is yes, absolutely. This is almost verbatim exactly what Jesus says right before he is captured and crucified. He absolutely is not just these like sweet progressive, love everybody version of Jesus that a lot of progressive Christians like to think that he was. There were some really aggressive, violent, divisive things that he advocated for. Now, the other side of that is understanding the context of what Jesus was actually talking about at the time and why he was doing what he did. It is completely different than this conversation. So if you are going to be like 99% of Christians in this country and take everything and apply it to your life like Jesus was talking directly to you, yes, they are acting in a godly way by cutting out the atheists in their lives. That is absolutely correct. However, if you are going to look at it in context of the history of the time and who Jesus actually probably was, it's completely different. He was talking specifically about an uprising, a military uprising against Rome to reclaim Jerusalem. And as we can see from today, there are people who are complacent, who are willing to, be occupied, who are willing to adhere to the power that's already there, as opposed to fight for freedom. So essentially, Jesus here, to my understanding, was saying, not you need to believe I'm going to die and be resurrected and be a Christian in 2022. He was saying, I'm going to ask you guys to pick up actual literal swords and come fight the Romans with me. And if you say, no, I can't, I want to be with my family, then I don't want you to follow me anyway. So it's a yes and no kind of conversation. Yes, that in the way we interpret Jesus today, he absolutely is saying that. If you talk about context, it's something completely different.
And he also said something similar, something like, do not worry about the poor. You will always have the poor among you. Think of me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He almost sounds like Trump. He sounds like Trump.
Yeah, and there are a lot of Christians who would agree with you and say that was a good thing, which is concerning. More and more, the more you hear this, the more you start understanding where Judas was coming from, where Jesus is like, we need to change the world. And Judas is there like, yes, we do. I'm here for this. Oh, look, you have this really expensive perfume. We could go sell that and give it to the poor. And Jesus is like, no, I kind of want a foot bath with this shit. Meanwhile, Judas is like, what is happening? So yeah, whole other story there. But that is quite funny. Thank you for bringing that up, Jim. I think that was a really helpful addition to the conversation.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Oh my gosh. See, this is why I still dive into the just all of the hermeneutics and shit that happen. It's so worth it to still study biblical literature and all of this, because those conversations get to be so much fun when you have them with your fundamentalist family. All right, last caller for today. I want to talk to Chris in Scotland. Give me a minute here. Chris, welcome to the show. Hello, Chris.
Hello, can you hear me?
There you are. Yes.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Nice to hear from you. You want to know how to deal with street preachers, is that correct?
Yeah, I often enjoy debating with them, but sometimes, even when they're saying the most vile stuff, they are so set in their beliefs and sincere in their beliefs, it can be difficult to dissuade them.
Mm-hmm.
There's people who shout abuse at them, knock over their signs, but yeah, and I understand that, but it's not really getting to the heart of the issue, and I'm just wondering, other than debating them, is there a right way to deal with street preachers?
Yeah, this is a really good question. Weirdly, I haven't encountered very many in Texas, but when I was living in Portland, I dealt with street preachers all of the time. They were all over the place. And it is really difficult to reason with somebody who decides that they are going to buy a megaphone and a sandwich board and make a fool of themselves in public, right? You have to have a certain level of just stubbornness and surety in your beliefs to get there. So what I would say is beat them at their own game. So you are not ever going to honestly convince a street preacher that they are wrong about something. If that happens, it's an Anthony Magnabosco video and it's a one-off. That is not how that works. What they are doing is they are making themselves a spectacle for other people and grabbing attention from others. if people go up and knock their sign over or push them around or, yell abuse at them, what that's doing is that is affirming to the people around them, I'm the victim, I'm in the right, feel sorry for me, that other person who disagrees with me is the asshole. What you can do, if you want to, it's fun, is make them into the asshole or laugh at them. So it's not about the street preacher anymore. The second they go out on that street, they are not interested in actually having conversations. It's a performance. And so what you get to do now is decide, do I want to be part of this performance? And how am I going to perform in a way that positions not even me as the good guy, but definitely throws a little bit of shade at them? So one way is just to yell jokes, right? They say something that just literally I've seen people just stand behind them and say, in bed, or make your mama jokes or something. And it makes people laugh. You're not the asshole anymore. You're not being abusive. You're just making it funny. And that will cause them to stop a lot faster than anything else.
Wow. That's a really good idea, so as it's not something I've really thought of. I've had very long debates with street preachers, and I know a fair bit about the theology, or the mythology rather. But I have not been successful in convincing a single one that they're wrong. You're quite right. But that's a good idea, to try and make them look foolish. That's quite a good idea, because often some of the stuff they're saying is horrible. There's children passing, and the street preachers talking about driving nails into Jesus' wrist with every lie you tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that honestly, some people have, oh man, it's so funny. Some people just dress up like Jesus and stand next to them and just hold a sign that says, I actually don't say that. Or it's so much fun to mess with them. There was this one time I was watching the street preacher, and he was engaging with an atheist and a Muslim at the same time, and being really aggressive and stupid and pig-headed. And I wasn't an atheist at the time. I was just a very progressive Christian. So I disagreed with him, but I wasn't an atheist yet. So I go up, and there's a pretty big crowd of people around this stoop that they're on. And I said, I'm a Christian. And the Christian was so happy to see me. You could see his face light up. And I was like, I am a Christian, and I believe in God. And this guy has no idea what he's talking about. And his face just fell. And he was so mad at me. And I looked at the Muslim and the atheist, and I said, I believe in a heaven, and I believe that I'm going to see you there, and I believe I'm going to see you there. And then I looked at the Christian, and I said, jury's out on you. And I walked away. There was some applause. That was a pretty good day for me. And he started yelling at me as I was leaving, how I was going to hell, how I was a terrible person. He didn't know me. But that let him drop his mask in front of everyone. And nobody after that, I guarantee, could probably take him as seriously. Because somebody who was also a Christian just told him that he was wrong. And then he completely dropped the facade. So there are ways to do it that are actually quite fun if that's what you're into.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea, because, they are trying to create this aura of authority in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
That's a very good idea, And, some of the people that were there, they did actually, knock over his signs or whatever, and I don't necessarily know that's the best way to go about it, but he was shouting, "You'll regret that in hell, young man."
Oh my
Stuff
gosh.
like that,
Exactly.
He was properly coming across as,
Yeah. As long as you can ruin the charade, exactly what you said. They want that authority. They want to be perceived as somebody who knows what they're talking about and who is trustworthy. And if either of those things can get poked at, then they need to get up and leave because that particular audience just saw through their mask. So if that's something you want to do, highly recommend it. It's really fun. I do it whenever I can, but also be careful. Just, make sure that they're not going to, go beat you up or something. Because I would not want that to happen to you, Chris. But yeah.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for calling in and letting us end on a kind of a fun note.
Thank you, and I hope you have a nice day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Oh my goodness. That was funny. All right, you guys. We are wrapping up. Thank you, everybody, for calling in and for chilling with me this morning. Let's go read through some super chats. I already read through Sky's, but I will again. Sky sent $2 Australian and says, great way to end my 30th birthday. Have a great show. Again, happy 30th birthday. Jamie Gallier sent $9.99 and says, missed you last week. Hope V and Eric feel better soon. Cheers to the mods. Yeah, we missed y'all last week. We are on the upswing, and we should both be back on next week. Sakura sent $10 and says, hi V, so happy to see you are well. Please give Eric and Kitty all of the snuggles. Will do, Sakura, thank you so much. And then Sarah Dye sent $20. Thank you, Sarah. And says, it's great to see and hear you again after this holiday weekend. What are your favorite things about the coming winter season? I was talking about this to Eric. One of my favorite things is that as I've started paying more attention to the changing of the seasons, I've realized that I start craving certain things. I'm craving root vegetables, especially things like baked goods with root vegetables, carrot pie, beet cake, like all of these things. I'm starting to ferment things and pickle things and preserve things. I'm making fire cider. So I'm starting to really dive into that preservation mindset that personally, like I could get a watermelon at any time of year because it's Texas and we have supply chains now. But there is a very internal kind of instinctual desire for certain types of food as it gets cold out because we're going into hibernation mode and we're going into preservation mode, trying to maintain all of the crops and things that we brought in over the summer. So for me, my favorite thing is really starting to play around with recipes like that and really listening to my body and what my body is wanting to eat right now. So for me, that's a lot of fun. All right, you guys, thank you so much. I am going to head on out, but until next time, I'm glad we had this talk.